Hello and welcome to Ashwin Equalety. My name is Christy, and today I'm talking to Miko Mechure, who is the clinical psychologist on staff at MLK Community Hospital in South Los Angeles. I felt it was really important to have a conversation about COVID and mental health directly because I feel like it's something that I've mentioned in passing quite a lot, but I haven't really talked about it and in just the effects of COVID on all of us. And I think it's going to be especially interesting to talk about her and her experience because she's been reporting to the hospital and has seen it firsthand. And so I'm really excited. Let's get right into it. So yeah, let's do it. But okay, hi.
Hi, how are you?
I'm good. How are you
I'm
doing?
good.
Yeah,
Good to
just like
see you.
good to see you too. It's been such a long time.
I know.
How is it in the hospital and everything?
Busy, but good.
Busy but good?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
So I've been looking really forward to this conversation because I feel I've talked about the pandemic in passing with a lot of my conversations because you can't a lot of it has been with mental health and things like that, and I feel like
Mhm.
you can't talk about that without talking about the pandemic.
Right.
Um, but I really love this opportunity to talk to you because yes, you do work in mental health, but you've actually been on the front line, in the hospital, which I think is a perspective that I don't see. So
Yeah. I mean, I'm definitely not in the front line as if I'm in the hospital treating patients on the wards or anything like that. So that has been modified for us. But but I am still going into the clinic.
yeah. But just to get us started then, could you describe what your role is or was or how what it has become during the pandemic? Because I mean, like you said, you do report to hospital, but it's not in the same space or the same capacity as other healthcare providers.
Yeah, so I am a licensed clinical psychologist and I work at Martin Luther King Community Healthcare. Um, I work within the integrated behavioral health program, which means we're working within primary and specialty care clinics, providing mental health services to all the patients within our community that are asking for mental health services. In our team, we have wonderful staff. We have, psychiatrists for medication as well as consultation. We have LCSWs, MSWs, and a substance abuse counselor. So we have kind of the whole set that's necessary for an integrated behavioral health program.
Okay, that's amazing. But you're the only psychologist on staff, right?
Yeah, I am the only psychologist for now on
Or
staff.
okay.
We're hoping to expand a little bit more. We are a smaller hospital. We are a community hospital. A lot of specialties are essentially just brand new or being introduced into our program. So for now, I am the only psychologist. We're hoping to change that in the very near future.
Yeah. Curious, outside of the pandemic, what is the importance of having a role like yours in the hospital? What are the
Great
benefits?
question. So typically, psychologists are integrated within the hospital setting for a variety of reasons. We provide, psychotherapy services on an outpatient setting, um, consultations for inpatient work as well. There's also a need for assessments sometimes, and yeah, so we basically try to be a bridge between the inpatient and the outpatient programs.
Okay. I think that makes a lot of sense. I think that's great because like I think I told you this before, it didn't really click for it makes sense to have a psychologist on staff, but it didn't click for me oh, no, it's not just it doesn't just make sense, it's necessary because
Yeah,
yeah.
it's not something that's I mean health psychology is a very new field,
Mhm.
and it's still something that's being integrated into hospital settings right now. And where I was before at Harvard, that was kind of the forefront for behavioral medicine, at least my introduction to an inpatient setting in this capacity. Um, and so we're working with patients with chronic medical illnesses as well as mental health issues. So oftentimes it's not necessarily about which came first, like the chicken or the egg, whether it's their mental health issues first or their medical issues. The fact that they have both is what qualifies them into our program.
Awesome. Okay. Well, thank you for that. Um, so like let's go back to the pandemic and just your experience with that because I mean it's been over a year now.
It has. It has. I know. When the pandemic started, I was actually in a different hospital,
Oh.
and that program sent us home. So I did a lot of work remotely, consultations remotely, and as well as like outpatient psychotherapy remotely.
Mhm.
Um, and then for MLK, we have just been on the foreground. So since I started, I was already going into the clinic, which I love. I mean, I think it's a different environment to actually be working alongside your peers, alongside other providers. And we have given patients an option to either do telehealth or come in if they're just unable to actually do telehealth at home. Some of
Mhm.
our patients don't have the capability for video conferencing. They don't have a phone with a camera, they don't have a laptop, they don't have Wi-Fi or steady enough Wi-Fi to actually do video conferencing. So for those patients, we want to afford them the opportunity to actually come in if they need to. There are also a lot of situations that have come up where it's just not safe for patients to talk about their mental health concerns in their home. With the pandemic that has started, there's also been a rise in domestic violence cases. There's also been a rise in abuse, child abuse. So in those scenarios, we want patients to feel safe when they're talking about, of course, their most vulnerable selves. So they may need to come in rather than doing it from home where maybe the perpetrator is right on the other side of the room or other side of the door kind of thing.
Right. So because I like in were you able to see patients during the pandemic then, or were you like in the
Yeah.
hospital?
So,
Okay.
so sometimes we see patients on the outside. I see adolescents as well, and it's really hard to work with an adolescent over televideo. So, in those scenarios, sometimes we do have to see them in person.
Okay.
There's some times when we can follow up via televideo, but again, it's more of meeting patients where they are and trying to understand equity concerns during this time as well. So again, if patients don't have the capability for televideo, we want to provide them another option.
Right. Well, so then what would you say were the most prevalent struggles, like outside of obviously the physical ones that come with COVID? Like what were the most prevalent sort of things that you witnessed while going through this thing that globally we
Yeah.
had to deal with?
So I think it's like there's like two sides. There's the patient side as well as like the provider side. I hear a lot of stories from the inpatient side where nurses, doctors, social workers, they're all exhausted. They're strained. There's a lot of, personal injury, moral injury that kind of goes into working with patients with COVID or even being in a crisis situation, like pandemic situation, in this climate, right? So that has been really hard for them. That's been really hard for them to grapple. Our hospital has been really trying to help in any way that they can. So the I think the inpatient side has like a debriefing hour once a week. They have there's now a social worker who's willing to meet with nursing staff or any inpatient staff who is having mental health concerns, because not only are they seeing this in their work setting, but of course they're experiencing it at home too.
Mhm.
So that's really hard to get it from every angle and not feel as though there's any respite in your life. Right. So they're seeing kind of the struggles of COVID at work, and then they see it at home. And then it's like, well, where else is there for them to go? So that's kind of one part of the struggle. And then there's the patient side where there's patients that have, lost their jobs, are either financially struggling, emotionally struggling. There's a lot of grief that has come into that's come up for patients during this time. Loss of, their careers, loss of their sense of independence, loss of even just your regular coping skills. That's just not possible when you're in lockdown, right?
Yeah.
Especially in Southern California, everyone is very outdoorsy. They want to go for a hike, they want to go out, but we weren't able to do that. So that in and of itself is a loss. And so trying to grapple with the fact that you're living within a pandemic and then finding other ways to cope takes a toll. So for the patient side, that's the struggle that we're seeing. There's a lot of impacts, whether it's family, whether it's finances, whether it's work, whether it's leisure. There's an impact somewhere, and causing anxiety, depression, um, just poor symptoms like low moods, and that's understandable because nothing is normal at this time.
Yeah, no, I think that that's such an important distinction to make, like, or like just being able to identify that feeling as like grief, because I don't think it's talked about a lot, and I'm guilty of this as well. Like I talk about the pandemic as like an opportunity to reevaluate things, but like in order to reevaluate things, you have to really go through the process of like losing something and figuring out what it is like how to shift that.
Yeah,
Um,
we
and I
have to
think
acknowledge that loss.
yeah, and I think grief is a really great, not great, but like it's like grief kind of like puts it spot on as to, like what that feeling is, because it's I think most people think of grief as like when you lose someone, like and you go through that like mourning process for someone, and yes, like while that's true, like you can also grieve much simpler things.
Yeah, you can grieve just regular things that kind of go on in your life, and even through the pandemic too. There's also this anticipatory grief that comes into play as well, where it builds up anxiety because I'm scared if I go outside, I could contract COVID, right? So there's already this anticipatory grief that comes into play. Or when you think about work environments, I don't know if my company is going to be able to sustain my position. So it's almost like you're waiting for a loss of some kind. Or I'm worried about my family members and their health. Again, it's building up that anticipation for a potential loss. And so the combination of both is not something that anyone or most people have actually experienced all at the same time. Um, so then all of those things comes crashing down.
Yeah. So, I mean, like in this vein, like what are the tools you found yourself using the most, like when talking about these things with people?
I think for myself, one, it's just trying to redevelop different ways of coping, right? Maybe running outside is not a possibility at this time, but what else could you do? What else could be done? Maybe even in a small space. What is possible? Stretching, meditation, yoga, whatever it is, right? Like trying to find something different. If you've never tried yoga before, let's try it now. Let's see if you like it. Um, and also boundaries. We always have to kind of think about boundaries for ourselves and the things around us. So, one of the things is we need to limit the amount of news we watch on a regular basis. We can't have it bombarding us constantly. So, if patients are watching news like 12 hours in a day, let's cut that down a little bit, right? Let's try something that's a little lighter so that you're not feeling all of that stress, all of that fear that the news is trying to place upon you. The other part too is just boundaries for yourself in terms of just your regular schedule. If you are working from home, create a schedule for yourself that works. Still waking up at a certain time, still maintaining those sleep hygiene, boundaries, meals, so that it kind of gives your body a sense of normalcy, even though we know it's not. Um, we can't expect ourselves to try to do things as they were or as we would normally do it because nothing about this time is normal. And
Right.
that's okay because this is kind of what we're working with. So if we have to forget certain things or, if we're trying to modify different things, that's okay. As long as it's something that is working towards like the betterment of yourself, something that's going to take care of yourself or take care of you in the long run.
Mhm. Yeah, I think the point you made about, like, drawing boundaries around, like, even just the news that you're consuming, I know I'm so guilty of that, and part of it is because, like, in doing projects like this where I'm talking to people about their problems, I feel like I need to be constantly informed, and it's exhausting.
It's exhausting, and the pandemic also collided the same year of an election. So I was guilty of this. I was consuming news every time I wasn't with a patient or something. I was watching it. It was on my phone. It was on social media. It was on the TV. I mean, we were so bombarded with all that information. And I think I noticed that once I placed a boundary on myself of, I'm only going to watch this amount of news in a day, I noticed my anxiety decrease. I notice that I'm not as afraid, or I notice that I'm able to actually relax rather than my mind spinning and spiraling and jumping down this rabbit hole of what if.
Yeah. No, like, I can't even begin to describe, like, how validating it is to hear that because, like, like I said, like, I am totally guilty of that. I mean, I still am, like, I still do this. And, there like, especially in the last few weeks, like, I have barely left the house out of just, like, fear and anxiety. Um, of just like my roommate left for a week, to go stay in San Diego, and I did not leave the house because I did not want anyone to know that I was home alone.
Yeah.
And and I don't know if, like, not consuming the news and not consuming media would have helped with that, but, it's true, it's almost like, trauma porn. It's kind of what it kinds of end up being is, like, we're just constantly seeing, like, all the bad things that are happening in the world, and while I don't think it's healthy to be ignorant of it all, like, it's
Mhm.
also not healthy to just have that consume your entire life.
Right. We have to have some kind of a balance, and um, it's not. I think that there's also a difference between like toxic positivity where we just only think of the things that are positive and we try to ignore everything that's negative. I don't think that that's fair for us either because as people, as humans, of course we have both emotions and that's okay. But we just have to have a balance, especially in the things that we can control in terms of consumption of media or consumption of information. We have to have a balance of what we're consuming so that we can then try to maintain a balance within ourselves.
Yeah. No, like, oh my god, yes, yes, yes. Okay, so what are the biggest lessons you think we can all take away from this collective experience that we've had, especially now that we're kind of returning to normal, like whatever normal means, because I feel like
Yeah,
it's crazy.
I know it's so weird to kind of go back to normal. I think that there's also a rise in anxiety and things going back to normal too, because sometimes we feel like we're not ready, or I've been in this, maybe not me personally, but other people may have been in their own shell for the past year. And so to have to go back out there is scary, is terrifying, which is also understandable. Um, so, understanding that these are the reactions that you're having is quite normal. very, very realistic to the current times. And listening to your thoughts, listening to your body, listening to what your your soul is telling you. um and again, if you need additional help with that, that's what mental health providers are for. But taking baby steps to kind of ease yourself back into the world is also really helpful, right? Trying to see what it's like for you again, to be exposed to a lot of people, to be out in the world once again. And in terms of things that we can take away, I think one of the things that we have to remember is that along with your physical health, mental health is so important. And I and one of the ways that the pandemic has taught us that is, when everything else is taken away from you, your physical and your mental health is what you have. So we have to take care of both at all times. And both actually go hand in hand quite a bit. When we're taking care of our bodies, when we are um, we're then taking care of our minds, right? And so when we're taking care of our minds, we can then take care of our bodies at the same time. So the two go together so much. Um, and the things that we're doing needs to kind of be aligned with that, be aligned with the value of taking care of your mind and your body.
I love that. I love that. That's I think that like in it's all, yes. Like that's I think like so important. Just and again, like and I feel like especially when you're talking about like, the anxiety of like just like what going back to normal means and trying to process what that means for everyone. Cause like I was actually unemployed before the pandemic was started, and I was already kind of going through that. And then I really settled into it. Like I was actually supposed to start a job the week that we went into lockdown.
Wow.
And so then like I ended up, just really settling into this idea of like working from home, and it was like because it seemed like such an impossibility to do anything else.
Right.
And and now that it's like now we're kind of like coming, the horizon is finally like, in view. It's like, okay, like I feel like I'm lucky that I found like a freelance position that I'm able to do remotely, but like it's my my roommate went to a bar a couple weeks ago, and like the anxiety that I felt like just like, "Oh my god, wait, like we're going out and socializing again."
Yeah, I know.
Like,
We got take a takeout order, and the restaurant that we ordered from, I was like, when I got there to pick up the food, I was like, oh, people are eating inside.
yeah.
That is so weird. I was like, oh, okay. And that's kind of, I think, surprising for me, because I do see people on a regular basis. I do leave my house daily, and yet it's still shocking to me that I'm like, oh wow, like things are actually indoors now. That's
Yeah.
that's wild.
Yeah, and it's like it's strange because it's like it was shocking, but then I also like it was also like the sensation of having to like stop and ask myself, like, why is this affecting me?
Yeah.
Like, why do I feel like this? Like, why is this surprising? Because it really shouldn't be.
Yeah, I know. And I think for some people, we have like there has been a benefit to being isolated, especially for people who are naturally introverted.
Mhm, yeah,
It's almost like, oh, I don't have to say no to parties, or I don't have to say no to invitations because there are none, and it feels a little bit more comfortable that way. And now that things are opening up again, it's like, oh, okay, I need to get back out there. I need to push myself once more. And so there, and in addition to that, of course, there's still a natural fear with the current strains, the virus, the pandemic that is still going on around us. And for the people who haven't been vaccinated, that's still scary.
mhm,
That makes sense. So I understand kind of the fears in that as well. and the anxieties that it causes because you're still worried about your own health or maybe the health of the people that you're with. So, there's still that realistic fear in it. And then there's also like um, a personal preference of, I actually liked being home. This is actually not bad. Yeah.
Yeah, but, like, it's like, I have people who, like, or I've been talking to people who are kinda going through that conversation with work right now is, like, sort of, like, not proving isn't the right word, but kind of is, like, where they're, like, now we've kind of proven that work from home is not as, like, crazy a thought as it used to be. Just like I feel like, a lot of people are realizing that it's actually more productive to work from home. A lot of companies are realizing it's cheaper for
Mhm.
them to have their people work from home.
Yeah, no
And
need for office spaces, no need for people to commute. There's
yeah,
no long traffic in LA. There's no, you don't
yeah,
have to pay for parking or anything like that. I think that has reduced, that's really opened up companies' eyes in terms of what can actually be done remotely.
mhm,
And in addition to that, I think now we can also see the possibility of working transcontinentally, right? We can maybe pick up a position uh, in a different state and have it be okay. As long as you wake up within their time zone,
yeah.
it's going to be a big deal. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. I actually had a conversation with someone in Prague yesterday.
Wow.
It's
Yeah.
really interesting. And, like, and yes, like, it was or not yesterday, the day before that, it was 9 a.m., which is, like, really early for me, but it was, like, dinner time over there, and she was like, "I'm so sorry, we could do this later." I'm like, "I'm not gonna, like it feels strange to ask you to do an interview with me at midnight."
Yeah.
Like, I appreciate it, but yeah, no, like, for sure. Just, like, as a quick, like, wrap up, what is something you hope everyone does, like, as far as their mental health, like, as, kinda as we head into this going back to normal, like, as people are getting vaccines, as we're kinda reentering society? Because I feel like, yes, there is this sort of cultural shift that's happening,
Mhm.
like, as we talked about with, like, having to be forced to be at home for so long.
Right.
And so, yeah, like, what is, like, one thing people can do to, like, check in or to do or, what would you say in your professional opinion?
I think, one thing that is really important is I don't want for people to continue listening to themselves, listening to your bodies, listening to your minds, asking yourself, what do I need at this time? I think that the pandemic has maybe opened up some eyes and some space for that. But as we reopen, as the world gets into that hustle and bustle once again, to take time to slow down and ask yourself, hey, what do I need at this moment? Do I need to take a step outside? Do I need a cup of, an extra cup of coffee? Do I need food? Or do I just need to take a breath? Right? To continue listening to yourself, to continue listening to what your inner child, your inner person is telling you.
I love that. And I think, like, to add to that is just, like, to acknowledge that inner child or that inner person.
Absolutely. Yeah, and that's definitely a great point. I think what I'm seeing a lot more is that people are actually acknowledging maybe that inner person because of all the emotional turmoil that has come up over the past year. But again, remembering that that person's there, that inner child is there, continue to acknowledge them, to continue to listen to them and validate their needs, just like we want, we can validate others, we also need to validate ourselves.
Yes. Yes, it's actually that was the conversation I just had about, like, advocating for yourself
Yes.
more, and not just, like, to like, they were talking about in, like, the healthcare space, like, advocating for yourself when you, like, go see doctors and whatever, but I think, like, it's also important to understand that you have to advocate for yourself as well.
With yourself, yeah. If you need to take a break, give yourself that break, just because you have a deadline, 5 minutes is not going to make it worse, right? Five
Yeah,
minutes is not going to impact your ability to take it to meet your deadline. Just
yeah.
give yourself that time.
Yeah. So important. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, this was great. Like I said, like I was really looking forward to this conversation because I haven't really talked about the pandemic directly, and I think it's such an important conversation to have because like just
We're
in
still living
general.
it.
Exactly, we're still living in it, and it's like, and I feel like I keep talking about it in passing. It's like, and it felt almost like disingenuous to just not actually talk about it
Yeah.
and the
Yeah.
actual impact of it.
Right. We're still living it. Things
Yeah,
are not normal yet. So we can't expect ourselves to act that way.
for
Right.
sure.
So just a little bit of grace, a little bit of patience, and giving yourself just a little bit of time to ease your way back into normalcy, whatever that looks like.
Yeah, I love it. Well, thank you so much. I'm gonna let you get back to your day because I know it's like a weekend and you don't get a lot of time off, so I will do that. But yeah, thanks so much.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Big thank you to Miko for coming and joining me and having this conversation on her weekend. This was such a valuable chat to have and so much great information. If you want to know more, I'm going to link her hospital, MLK Community Hospital, down in the captions, and I will also link their charitable foundation if you want to show them some love and support as well. I can't tell you how much of a dream this has been, and so I'm just so grateful for you all joining me on this journey. Um, Thank you guys so much, and I can't wait to sleep with you again next week. Bye.